I received an email today from a very special person. And that person asked a question that is probably the most common question I've seen and that's out there. I had this question myself at one time for new and beginning off-roaders and overlanders. Basically, the question boils down to what's the best radio choice for emergency communications. So I'm going to read that email from that very special person and tell you why that person is special. And I'll give you my answer, what I've come up with after off-roading and putzing around in the desert for several years now. So let's talk about it. Roll that intro. I don't do intros. I have too much respect for you as the viewer, too much respect for your time. I know your time is valuable. I know you like to pretend like you've got more important things to do. The email reads, I've edited it slightly for privacy. We're looking for more insight as to what may be best suited for our needs. We know nothing about CB or GMRS. Basically, this would be mostly for off-road getaways in the middle of nowhere, where there's no other signals, like cell phone, etc., for breakdowns, emergencies, and whatnot. What is the best? Very common question. Now, what makes this email from this person special is that it came from my sister. Yes, there is more of this gene pool out there remaining. So like a good little brother, instead of picking up the phone and calling or replying to the email, what could be more personal than a video on YouTube? But I thought I wanted to make a video on YouTube because this is such a common question. So basically, they're going out off-roading, overlanding, doing it, whatever it is they're doing, fishing, hunting, hiking. What's the best method of communication for when something goes wrong when you're out there? And of course, my standard answer always is, don't go alone. Don't go alone. If there's somebody else with another vehicle, if something goes wrong, your vehicle explodes, you fall and you break a leg, you've got somebody else with another vehicle that can get out and get help for you. Now, I understand that there are people out there that do not like to go with other people. The whole point of getting out is getting away from other people. And good Lord Zeno, I get it. So if you must go out alone, you need to be able to save yourself if something goes really wrong. Now, some people will say, but I've gone out lots of times and I never had a problem. And that's about the stupidest thing you could ever imagine anybody saying. Does that mean that now, because you never had problems in the past, that guarantees you'll never have a problem in the future? That's just stupid. So anytime you go out, you need to be able to be prepared to save yourself. Maybe that just means being able to walk back to the highway, however far away it is. If you're camping out 500 yards from the highway, it's easy, not a big deal. But most people go out a little bit further than walking distance. Some people like to go out miles away from the nearest highway and the nearest cell phone tower. So your cell phone, throw that out the window because that's useless other than playing games. You're too far to walk because if you're like me, you're too fat and lazy to walk very far. Actually, I can walk pretty far, but not everybody can. So I would say if you're bound and determined to go out on your own, against my advice, you need to be prepared with enough food and water if something goes wrong, first aid if you slip and twist an ankle or shoot yourself with an arrow in the leg or whatever. But of course, most people ignore all that and just hope nothing goes wrong. And they'll rely on the CB radio that they've got in their vehicle. If something goes wrong, I'll get in and turn it on and put it on channel 9 and say breaker, breaker a few times. And somebody will come to my rescue. First off, this is not 1977. Nobody's out there with CBs. There are some people out there that still have CBs in their vehicles, but they're not listening for you. Nobody is monitoring channel 9, waiting for you to call for help. Yes, somebody will post a comment saying, in my area, we monitor channel 9. That's great for you, Einstein, but we're not in your area. And 99.999999% of the rest of the world isn't within 3 miles of your area. So basically, unless you have somebody waiting and listening for your call for help at the other end with their CB, and they're within range, which is usually just a couple of miles, CB is useless. Forget it. The next choice is GMRS. And as you know, we use GMRS. It is our method of communication of choice for when we go off-roading with groups, large or small. But we don't rely on it for emergency communications, much for the same reasons as why CB is useless. Number one, somebody has to be listening at the other end waiting for your call, and nobody does that. Even if somebody was at the other end listening for your call for help, you have to be within range of that person. GMRS does have the advantage of using repeaters, but that means you have to be within range of a repeater, which means you have to know where the repeater is, and your radio has to be configured beforehand to talk to that repeater. Sometimes that's just not convenient or practical, and because there's not a lot of GMRS repeaters out there in the world, that's just usually not a practical choice. It's just in an emergency situation, GMRS is not going to help you most of the time. The other option is ham radio. Now, you know my feelings about ham radio. I love ham radio. I do not like ham radio operators that are dickheads and post stupid comments all over the internet and make up lies. That's for another video. Ham radio is a good option for emergency communication. Much like GMRS, you would have to be within range of a repeater. Great thing about ham is that there are repeaters everywhere, almost everywhere. There's a lot of repeaters, but you have to get a license to operate on ham. You have to get the license to operate on GMRS as well, but that's a fishing license, basically. You just send money and you get the license. Ham, as you know, you have to take the test. Not a big deal. It's not that difficult. You also have to understand how ham works. You're not going to just take a ham radio out of the box, turn it on, and start talking to people like you can do with a CB, even though there's nobody to listen to talk to. And you can do that with a GMRS. You can basically pick up GMRS radio, take it out of the box, and start talking to somebody if there's somebody listening. Ham radio, you have to know how to use it. So there's a learning curve. You also have to be within range of a repeater, which means before you go somewhere, you have to know where those repeaters are. You have to stay within range of that repeater, and your radio has to be configured to connect to that repeater. Now, in an emergency situation, if you knew where the repeaters were before the emergency happened, and if you configured your radio to talk to that specific ham repeater that you're in range with, chances are there is somebody listening at the other end who could then relay the information to 911 or whoever to get you some help. You're not going to connect directly to emergency services from ham radio or GMRS. Your only hope is to have somebody listening at the other end who can then relay and call emergency services for you. The best bet is with ham radio, but you've got that learning curve. And of course, like I said, you've got to be within range of the repeaters, and you've got to configure to talk to those repeaters ahead of time. So really, the best option for a serious emergency, other than avoiding it in the first place by not going alone, is to use one of those satellite phones or a Garmin InReach type system, which I do not use because I never go alone. That's really one of the only ways, or the best way, to be able to get a hold of somebody in a real emergency when you're made the choice to go out all alone. And even though you never had problems before, you suddenly have a problem. That's the best choice to get emergency help quickly and reliably. Forget about CB radio. Forget about GMRS. Maybe ham, if you're willing to take the time, do the research and take the test, get your license, that's probably the second best option. Or just don't go alone. Take two vehicles. Problem solved. So there you go. There is no perfect answer. That's my answer. The answer is there is no good answer, except maybe for the really expensive satellite type phones. My answer is don't go alone. I hope that helps. It's clear as mud now. If you have questions, leave your comment below. I'll do my best to answer. If I don't answer, there's, trust me, plenty of YouTube experts that would love to answer your questions. They're usually helpful. Thank you for watching. We hope to see you on the trail. But not alone.